I have always been a fan of the Spider-Man. From the moment my father thwipped into my mother, allowing me a chance to swing into this world and make something of myself, the web of life and destiny had already decided that I'd spend a lot of money on Spider-Man memorabilia. This does not make me special. He's the most beloved character in all of Marvel Comics by a landslide. He may even be the most popular superhero, period, but that spot has some stiff competition. The point is, I'm only one of millions of people on God's fantastic flat earth who holds this sticky swingy guy near and dear to my heart. Can the same be said about the 2014 video game adaptation of his least regarded movie to date? No, I'm probably the only jackass still thinking about this game at all, let alone enjoying it. Being a movie game means the developers had to haul major ass in order to get it out by the time the film dropped. The critics totally lost their marbles when it was released, and the audience wasn't much kinder. I often see it brought up as one of the worst Spider-Man games to date. Couple that with Insomniac's bigger, sexier games hitting PC, and Amazing Spider-Man 2 holds less relevance than ever before. Hell, you can't even buy the game itself anymore. It was delisted from digital storefronts years ago, which means there's no way to buy its DLC or play it at all without buying a used copy off of eBay. Legally speaking, that is. So yeah, this game really doesn't have a lot going for it, especially in the modern age. But if you're among the dozens of people who have seen me rave about Billy Madison, you know I love a good underdog story. This game has the press slandering it, big corporations censoring it, and the flow of time itself revealing its horrible yet familiar brand of punishment. This game would have been destined to fail were it not for the Spider-Man name. And yet, in spite of everything the universe has done to it, I sense a great deal of both effort and passion behind this project. And folks, it doesn't get much more Spider-Man than that. Now let me make one thing clear. I do not hold any sort of nostalgia for this game. I know it's over a decade old now, making it heckin' retro, but I only played it for the first time this year. I do own and have played nearly every Spider-Man game to have come out since Bush's demolition charges went off, but for some reason I missed this one back in the day, even though I did have a functional Wii U. I'm pretty sure its movie is also the only one I have not seen during its initial theatrical run. For one reason or another, both forms of Amazing Spider-Man 2 seemed to subconsciously repel me back in 2014. So rest assured, there will be no rose-tinted glasses here. You want to know where my rosy tint can be found? Probably about a decade earlier, before I became a stupid, fat, ugly, nerdy stain upon the gift of life itself. My last happy memory occurred prior to the Great Recession, so my definitive Spider-Mans were this guy and this guy. The same way Christopher Reeve embodies Superman, I had thought of Tobias as the true Spider-Man. That was my era. I saw the scene where he's designing the suit, and I was like, how did he draw that? Did he invent Spider-Man? No, my boy, my dad said. Spider-Man was invented by Stan Lee. Stan Lee who? I never did figure out his last name. Either way, that clearly wasn't Stan Lee on screen. That was Peter Parker. No, I didn't think the movie was real. I just figured that the casting directors had to go out and find a guy named Peter Parker in order for him to play the role. Otherwise, how would he know to answer to his name? Yeah, this was probably the first movie I cared enough about to actually try and think critically of. I figured it out eventually, I think. I sure took Toby for granted, though. I assumed he'd play the role until he was old and gray. I mean, those movies did great. There were so many villains they could cover. The Walmart by me was stocked with merch years after 3 came out. Why would they ever feel the need to replace Tobe? My dad had even told me that they got Spider-Man 4 and 5 in the works. Needless to say, I was pretty fucking confused when after a 5-year wait, which is an eternity as a youngster by the way, my boy had gone British on me. I didn't hate the movie, but my first impressions were still less than favorable. I mean, what's up with his eyes? Why does he look like that? Why is he skateboarding to indie music? Why does he have iPhone? Why do I have boner? Where is James Franco? Oh, I forgot. I'm so sorry. My condolences, peace be with you. Now, those are obviously very surface level criticisms, of course. Now that I'm a grown-ass man and the glow of youth is firmly behind me, I can definitely appreciate this movie as well as this iteration of my favorite cartoon character a bit more than I used to. Even if the sequel sucked ass. But my opinions on the movie aren't really all that relevant here. That whole tangent I just went on was pointless, and I'm gonna tell you why. This game is divorced from its theatrical counterpart in the best way possible. Unlike the Tobey Maguire games, which mostly followed the plots of the movies and also retained the same cast for voice and likenesses, this game has its own continuity, and its own face. See, this game served as a sequel to the first game, which served as an alternate epilogue to the first movie. That's why there are giant robots in the introduction, and that's also why it appeared in a separate bubble than Andrew Garfield in the latest Spider-Verse. So there you go, if you don't like this movie, you can still like this game. No more off-topic tangents this video, alright? The story kicks off with a serial killer unaliving Uncle Ben's murderer. He exclusively targets criminals and he initials CK at each crime scene using his victim's blood. Now, the game refers to him as the Carnage Killer, but real Spiderheads would immediately piece together that CK actually stands for Cletus Cassidy, also known as Carnage. Spoiler alert, he's the final boss. That wasn't in the movie. We also have Kraven the Hunter, who takes on a bit of a mentor role for a short while in order to improve Spider-Man's skills so that he's more fun to murder and taxidermy, like he did to some of the other villains from the first game. It's really him and Kingpin that get most of the focus in this game, rather than the actual movie villains. It already sounds pretty different, right? Well, I haven't even mentioned the biggest departure from the movie. If you are a Gwen Stacy fan who was depressed after seeing her brutally crack her skull on the silver screen 11 years ago, you should definitely play this game because she lives. That's right, Gwen Stacy makes 0 appearances in this game. Her fans may finally know peace because she is completely absent. She never had the chance to be horribly murdered. So to recap, this game has an original story, more villains, and less female presence than its movie. What more could you possibly ask for? It even has separate triggers for each of Spider-Man's hands, which means you can pick which arm to unleash your sticky white discharge from. Not only that, but the webs also stick to buildings, which I'm pretty sure was not the case in the first game. The freedom and realism is unrivaled here. Sure, the main criticism is that you have to constantly micromanage the crimes in order to maintain your good boy meter so that you stay off the public enemy list. But to that I say, so what? You're being hunted by flying Robocops? Just fucking beat their ass, you're Spider-Man. Oh, you don't feel like doing that? Well, why don't you try saving lives? If you, as Spider-Man, are pissed off that you have to stop crimes and rescue civilians, then maybe Mr. John Jonah Jameson Jr. was in fact correct about Peter Parker. Oh, boo-hoo, the superhero game is making me do superhero things. How could the devs not see this coming? Of course none of you selfish fucks want to perform acts of kindness in your power fantasy. Nah, you just want to avoid paying your own property taxes by living with Aunt May and go on joyrides up in the sky while the common folk below you have to pay for gas and toll booths. I mean, just look at the way he rides the train, too. He couldn't be asked to pay for his own ticket and board it like a normal person, no. Instead, he chooses to mooch off the city he claims to love so much. This is truly the twisted, evil Spider-Man you heartless pricks deserve. Spider-Verse was wrong. Not everyone is fit to wear the mask or act as a hero. Just like not everybody deserves to enjoy this amazing Spider-Man game. That's why you guys hate it, because it makes you look inward. I hope that's clear to you now. If you're really about that spider life, and I'm talking real scholars of the ancient texts, you'll see that there is so much to enjoy here. The unlockable outfits have some pretty neat selections, which you don't tend to see very often in other games. Each one comes with a cute little description which explains what the costume is doing in Peter's closet and adds a bit of personality to the game as a whole. Most games have this done in a boring menu screen, but these guys took the time to write out a little extra story and let Spider-Man practice his whimsy. Through this, we learn stuff like the fact that Peter's into comic books and cosplaying, Gwen stitched up his old costume from the first movie, and perhaps most interestingly, Miles Morales exists in this world as the fictional Spider-Man. The Spider-Man comics exist in universe, but they use Miles' name instead of Peter's. It's a pretty fun nod to an up-and-coming new character at the time. It kinda reminds me of the Hollywood arc from the Ultimate Comics, where Sam Raimi was filming a Spider-Man movie within the story itself. And then the real Spider-Man shows up and he's all like, "Fuck you, Toby," but then the real Doc Ock shows up and, well, it just becomes this whole big thing. Speaking of comic books, remember that Stanley guy my dad was talking about? He's an actual character in this game and he has his own role in the story, which automatically places him above Gwen in terms of plot relevance to this Peter Parker. He was good friends with Uncle Ben, God rest his soul, and he owns a comic shop you can interact with. You're able to read classic stories while listening to the oldies station he has on, or play this arcade machine, where you have to fight hordes of goons in an empty void. The final cutscene of the game takes place here, which, in retrospect, was probably the most touching way for the devs to bid their time with Spider-Man farewell. I was confused when I got to the Kingpin boss fight and saw that they literally lifted his fat jokes word for word from the Ultimate Comics.
You're so fat your high school yearbook photo was taken from a helicopter. You are so fat. When you cut yourself shaving, marshmallow fluff comes out.
But then I saw that they had that entire arc in Stanley's shop.
Hey, I'm not saying Wilson Fisk is fat. But I tell you, when he steps on a scale, it says 1 at a time.
Aww. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the inclusion of these comics make this the last Spider-Man game to feature the World Trade Center? The modern games featured the Freedom Tower in the trailer, but it was replaced with this weird pillar upon release. It's probably not surprising considering they couldn't even hold on to the Chrysler Building. At this rate, you better enjoy the Empire State while it lasts. This game doesn't have that problem though. It's about as accurate as they could have gotten it within their means, and it does include what appears to be the new World Trade Center under construction in Lower Manhattan, which is consistent with the time of its release. It's not one-to-one, but it's close enough that I think it's safe to say that's what they were going for. This, on the other hand, totally unmistakable. Those are the twins in a video game, technically. Being a part of New York's skyline automatically makes the World Trade Center a part of Spider-Man's world. In addition to being drawn in the background all the time, there was also a story involving the Green Goblin battling our hero in the real-life restaurant Windows on the World. The first movie was advertised showing a clip of him webbing a helicopter in between the towers. We also have the final battle from Enter Electro, which was changed just before release because it was originally meant to come out just a week after the attacks. Then there's of course the 9/11 issue where Spider-Man witnesses the attacks firsthand and Dr. Doom famously cries. People go back and forth about whether it was in poor taste or not, but it is one of the few times Marvel has given us Spider-Man's take on a national tragedy. He says, "Only madmen could contain the thought, execute the act, and fly the planes. The sane world will always be vulnerable to madmen because we cannot go where they go to conceive of such things. We could not see it coming. We could not be here before it happened. We could not stop it. But we are here now. You cannot see us for the dust, but we are here. You cannot hear us for the cries, but we are here." It's touching, but let's be real, his spider sense has been shown to be one of his most powerful abilities, so I'm pretty sure it would pick up on the most deadly attack to occur on US soil. Doctor Strange should definitely know about it since it's referenced in almost every iteration of the Marvel Universe from that point on. But that's besides the point, though. Being based in New York, it would have been weird if they completely ignored it. Though that is kinda what happened in the Ultimate Comics I mentioned earlier. They just sort of quietly stopped drawing them. Makes sense, you can't have two 9/11 issues, that'd just be overkill. Plus, with the reveal that Peter only spent a year as Spider-Man before his fake-out death, this story could take place in '01 just as easily as '09. Comics are dumb. Main Spider-Man saw the towers go up and come down, but none of that's canon today because of the sliding timescale. But who gives a shit about that stuff, though? I saw Spider-Man in the World Trade Center. It happened, and nobody can take that away from me. There was one other Spider-Man who was active at the time, though. One who does grow up and doesn't have his history retroactively changed. That's right, the first movie again. Even if you don't count the trailer, the Twin Towers do appear in the background a few times, despite their efforts to scrub them out of the footage. Most notably, they show up in Spider-Man's lenses the first time he wears his costume. I always did like that scene. All three of the movies have a sort of wholesome, patriotic energy to them, and I think that's part of why they resonated with so many people. Hell yeah, you couldn't do shots like that today with these new Englishmen. But it raises the question, how did movie Spider-Man react to 9/11? Movie 1 was released in May of '02, but given the presence of the towers and the fact that the film takes place from Peter's high school graduation to sometime after Thanksgiving, I'd place it in fall of '01. It's either that, or it takes place in fall of '02 and Spider-Man simply lives in a world where 9/11 never occurred. A pretty plausible explanation given how innocent and cozy the vibes are here. If the attacks actually took place, would anyone really care about the Goblin turning a few guys into skeletons? People were convinced it was the end of days, national security was shaken to its core. They hit the fucking Pentagon! Osborn's terrorist attack pales in comparison to Osama's. The Daily Bugle would probably try to link the Green Goblin to Al-Qaeda and maybe blame Oscorp for giving their weapons to the terrorists once the identities became public. Actually, if movie Spider-Man suited up for the first time during the same summer 9/11 occurred, there's no way Jonah Jameson would let that slide. He hates him so much that you know there would be headlines all about that masked menace webbing bombs to the towers.
At worst, Spider-Man's a crazed terrorist bomber. At best, he's a failure. A complete and total failure!
I don't think Spider-Man would be able to stop a 9/11 all by himself, but he would definitely be helping out at Ground Zero like his comic counterpart. The public would be way more hostile and afraid of him, though. And if they did still come around and recognize his heroism, he'd likely be recruited to fight in the Middle East. There's no way in hell they'd let a super soldier fly around like he does in the midst of a war on terror. And with the shit that they'd make him do over there, I don't think he'd be able to call himself a hero anymore. Not after that. Given that none of that ended up taking place on screen, we could probably assume that 9/11 simply didn't happen in the Tobyverse, right? We do see the towers in the background in some later scenes, including the final swing, which is well after the attacks would have taken place. Given the other scenes where they were scrubbed out, though, there's a good chance that this was just a mistake. It's not front and center like the lens reflections, so it's hard to say if they actually meant for them to be there. I mean, Spider-Man 2's train scene was filmed in Chicago. Does that mean Spider-Man's New York has its own Clark and Lake station? I mean, I'd be alright with that, but I doubt that was the intention here. All that shit aside, there's really only one way to know for sure whether or not 9/11 happened in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. The answer lies in the first ever 3D open-world Spider-Man game. The first time we were ever allowed to freely swing through Manhattan and explore Spider-Man's home. The Spider-Man 2 movie game. I think we can all agree Spider-Man 2 takes place well after 2001. This official video game adaptation of my favorite movie of all time is the only way for us to check for ourselves whether or not the towers still stand in Tobyland. So, what's the verdict? Did they completely ignore the towers, or did they fully commit to creating an American utopia? Well, the answer is neither. They actually went through the trouble of adding the tribute in light to the game. This was a real-life memorial consisting of several searchlights that created two large beams of light where the towers once stood. From my understanding, it's now only done annually on the anniversary of the attacks, but the lights are always on in Spider-Man 2. Case closed. 9/11 did in fact happen in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. I guess they just took it a whole lot better than I gave them credit for. Oh, the game? It's alright, I guess. You know, if you're really bored on a weekend or whatever, go ahead.